Good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to another BH Futures webinar. The topic for today is Precision and Intelligent Systems in Medicine. Our honorable guests are Professor Azra Bihorac and her project manager, George O'Malley. Tonight we'll learn a little bit about how the challenges of traditional predictive analytics can be overcome by automated AI models fed by live streaming electronic health record data with mobile device outputs. We're going to find out how a multidisciplinary research group of experts in data science, AI, and clinical informatics is developing intelligent clinical decision-making systems and technologies to optimize healthcare system delivery. Azra, George, thank you so much for being here.
Really great opportunity for me to get with a group of very talented people, and many of you will be from my home country. So my talk today is really maybe provocative, not without reason, and I want to convince you on 153 billionaires own more wealth than almost 5 billion people combined. Unpaid domestic work by women, such as cooking, cleaning, caring for children and elderly, represents the contribution of at least $10,000 billion in global economy. That is more than 3 times the size of global tech industry. As you can see, the inequity that exists in the world is also not equally distributed and affects women and underrepresented minorities much more profound. In the same time, we are living through what I called a post-industrial civilization crisis of an end of liberal story, as author Yuval Harari states. We are facing artificial intelligence, bioengineering, and nanotechnology as a force that threaten to eliminate need for human masses as a labor force. The economic value and political power of most humans threatens to be eliminated. Thus, the incentive to provide welfare for all of us may weaken with time, and we are witnessing that trend in modern societies. So, with the rise of the AI efficiency, we might be seeing decrease in the need, a perception of value of the human beings. In the same time, we are facing for the first time in a human history the true evolution of intelligence on a short-term scale. The rise of bioengineering and genetic modification will allow us for the first time to enhance human body in a way and on the scale we have not seen before. Thus, for the first time, economic inequality may be translated into biological inequality, and those who have economic advantage may for the first time gain true biological advantage, and we may move from elitism and exceptionalism to truly superhumans. And perhaps for some of us, the future may look like this, while for few privileged ones, the future may look like this. And if you think this is just a science fiction, here is the excerpt from the article in 2019, citing Jeff Bezos, one of the most rich, wealthy billionaire in the earth, talking about the plan for moving humans to the space colonies like this, as a projection, as a response to the climate crisis, threatening climate crisis. So obviously there are privileged portion of our society who is exercising ideas about this type of inhabitation. So today I want to talk about 3 technologies and movements that I think will really shape the next decade of human research and evolution. Those are pervasive intelligence, multidimensional biohacking, and the redefinition of identity. My team, Precision and Intelligent Systems Medicine Partnership Group, is a homegrown grassroots movement of scientists across different disciplines, including medicine, engineering, and digital art. We now have an extensive group of PhD, master students, postdoctorals, and faculty members engaged in multiple projects that employ artificial intelligence and digital art in healthcare environment. Our alumni are working in the most prestigious companies in the United States, such as Intel, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. They are also faculty in a university in the United States. I'm really proud of what we have achieved in the last 5 years. Let's talk about pervasive intelligence. Pervasive intelligence is term coined to delineate combination of pervasive monitoring with artificial intelligence algorithm. This approach allows for embedded digitally enabled decision making in different areas, including, as example, eco-monitoring for climate change monitoring and decision making in their environment. We have applied this concept in healthcare, and we have with the funding of National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health, we have developed the concept of intelligent intensive care unit. Why intensive care unit? 6 million patients is admitted every year to ICUs in the United States. However, the mortality is still very high for that group of patients. Up to 30% of patients admitted to ICU may still die. The cost to deliver care to these patients exceeds $80 billion per year. However, the clinical assessment, the most intensive environment in the hospital, being ICU, is still very limited. And reasons for that are multiple. The monitoring depends on manual assessment by humans, nursing and physicians. It's subjective and often sporadic because healthcare providers are engaged in many other tasks. Environmental factors such as light, noise, and visitations are not routinely and continuously monitored. None of these factors in the same time that is embedded in the current predictive models used to outline acuity in the real time of patients in ICU. The concept of intelligent ICU, including inertial EMG sensors, accelerometer, and the color and depth camera. Most recently, we have started using thermal cameras. Using these sensors at the bedside, we are linking them to powerful AI algorithms to do tasks such as facial action unit detection or person and body surface mapping in order to outline complex emotions or movements in real time in intensive care unit. This is the result of the pilot study we have done in our ICUs, validating this concept and applying it to monitor delirium among intensive care unit patients. Using series of complex deep learning model, we use RGB frames to do face alignments and detection. From that, recognize patient face among other faces and delineate facial expression, recognize them, and use to derive complex indices such as pain or other emotions, such as agitation. Also, we use RGB frames for person and body part detection and activity recognition, such as sitting, standing, or moving in the room. Most recently, we have developed generative models that can reconstruct a full 3D mesh of human body from a single RGB image, as you can see here on this slide. We went a step further from here, from intelligent monitoring, and tried to combine intelligent monitoring with adaptive preventive actions. We use delirium, one of the common complications among critically ill patients that affect their outcomes, both short and long term. Using biological signature of circadian rhythm that applies transcriptional changes in the clock gene regulations in the human body, we have developed an approach that combines clinical risk model with the circadian disruption quantification using both visual, environmental, and patient cues and biological signature in order to predict patients at risk for developing ICU delirium and quantify environmental changes that may affect that or aggravate that risk, and then develop tools that can sense those changes, provide bedside nurses and physicians with concrete action to adapt environment and ameliorate risk among these high-risk patients. This is a new study that is currently being reviewed by National Institute of Health for the funding. And we are excited to start it soon in our ICUs. Another domain that we have applied concept of intelligent care is intelligent surgical care project with Idealist platform. The idea for this project is that we can combine live-streamed electronic health records data with clinical reasoning in real time to provide forecast of risk for postoperative complications to surgeons and other healthcare providers, allowing them to apply timely preventive actions and prevent development of the complications after surgery. We have developed series of the algorithms that can do that in real time throughout the continuum of the perioperative care. But why perioperative medicine, you can ask? Well, the average American can expect to undergo 7 surgical operations during her lifetime. Each year, 150,000 patients die and 1.5 million develop a major complication after surgery in the United States. Perioperative medicine accounts for 40% of the national health budget in our country. Thus, the artificial intelligence poses an opportunity to be used to overcome the limitations of the current system that relies on often not very precise predictive modeling and single individual usually heuristic-based limited cognitive decision by the surgeons at the bedside. And this concept is applied for augmented surgical decision-making in our study. The idealist system uses my surgery risk algorithm. This algorithm was developed and validated in our cohort, in our hospital. And it's a machine learning algorithm that predicts risk for major complication and deaths after surgery. Using the real-time data from electronic health records, the Idealist platform integrates data with my surgery risk algorithms to provide real-time feedback to surgeons and allow them to adjust their actions in real time. During the course of our study at the University of Florida, we have generated real-time prediction for more than 100,000 surgical encounters for more than 60 surgeons that practice at the University of Florida who have used these predictions to improve their performance. As you can see here, we predict risk for major complications such as need for intensive care unit admissions for more than 2 days, need for the life support for more than 2 days, wound complications, neurologic complications, sepsis, or thromboembolism, or acute kidney injury. And you can see here too that we are able to do significant prognostic enrichment of our high-risk group patients compared to low-risk group where the patient with a high risk for complications based on our algorithm will have 6 to almost 22-fold increase in the risk of complication based on our prediction. This prognostication allows us to focus our care and intensity of clinical care to really those patients who need our intervention. We expanded this model furthermore to apply it to the patients in intensive care unit and those on surgical and medical wards. We have developed an algorithm called Deep SOFA that is a continuous acuity score for critically ill patients that use clinically interpretable deep learning model. This model provides real-time instantaneous assessment of acuity that learn from individual trends in patient clinical trajectories. SOFA, or Sequential Organ Failure Score, is a traditional organ dysfunction score that relies on 13 clinical variables. It usually requires manual extraction of the worst value from each of these variables and then applies a formula derived from logistic regression model to calculate a score that also is connected with the projection of the mortality risk. Applying the same 13 input variables, we have developed a continuous score that does not require manual input of variables and use entire values available that are collected during the clinical care to calculate this score continuously every hour using deep learning model. The deep learning model that we applied also has attention mechanism that allow us to provide interpretability of the model, that can visualize the input in a time series that is most important for prediction of the mortality. As you can see here on the right side, this deep SOFA score project risk over time that can range from low, medium to high, while in the same time provide inputs of the time series such as heart rate, blood pressure, or oxygen saturation, and identifies moments in the time when this changes in this time series have contributed to the increased mortality or deterioration of the patient. This model was trained on two different cohorts. One was University of Florida with more than 30,000 ICU encounters, and another one was a MIMIC database that is a publicly available database of ICU encounters from Beth Israel Hospital for almost 50,000 ICU encounters. Both models were then cross-validated on another cohort and performed very well and definitely exceeded the performance of either traditional SOFA or bedside SOFA that was a logistic regression model based on the same 13 variables we use for our deep learning model. But then we moved forward. We moved beyond that and asked the question, how do visual cues that we are developing using pervasive sensing, such a facial action unit, how are they correlating with the SOFA score in our ICU patients? And you can see here, interestingly, we were able to identify some of the facial action units that correlates highly with the SOFA score, meaning patients who have these action units are more likely to have higher risk for the development of the clinical deterioration. Some of these facial action units are not intuitive, somewhat like blinking, jaw-dropping, cheek raise, brow lower. Not traditionally you would think about observing them, but you can also think that we do apply paradigm on visual cues, facial cues, to judge expression of distress or negative emotions on each other's. Often as a physician, we enter the room and make a statement, well, you don't look well today. You don't, or you look better today, right? So as the humans, we use visual perception to cast judgment about wellness in everyday and also in healthcare. So we are trying to use that paradigm here where the visual cues are now used together with other biological parameters in a clinical care to forecast deterioration or acuity of the patient's status. And here you can see that we did a small testing of this hypothesis using the output layer of deep SOFA score without any retraining, and we applied on a new subset of 48,000 ICU encounters, and then combined that output layer with the 5 numeric derived values from our visual cues that have the best performance, and then using gradient boosting machine, developed a new model that predicts acuity status for the patient in the next 4 hours, and does that continuously through the hospitalization. And the AUC of the pure clinical model was 0.86, while the AUC area under curve, meaning diagnostic performance of the combined model was 0.9, highly superior. Obviously, this is a preliminary study, but highly encouraging and really confirm our hypothesis that we can combine different inputs to develop superior performance models. In the same time, we are developing computable phenotypes that are set of algorithms that use different approaches of both logic-based and unsupervised models to develop phenotypes or diagnostic annotations of the complex conditions such as changes in a kidney status, acute kidney injury and chronic kidney disease, or sepsis, using purely clinical data with no human input. So these autonomous computable phenotype can be launched into electronic health records to annotate complex conditions without any human input and use them for their tracking in real time and reporting. And an essential part of for our development of predictive models for these conditions. Again, this is a work of one of my junior faculty, Dr. Bashlant, who was awarded Career Award by National Institute of Diabetic and Kidney Disease. So I'm going to move from the pervasive intelligence to the multidimensional biohacking. So multidimensional biohacking put a step beyond what I just showed and now use not only clinical environmental data, but also variety of omics approaches such as gene expression, metabolomics, proteomics, and transcriptomics to longitudinally assess human wellness and health in the most granular way on the scale we have never seen before. Recent study in Science followed two twin brothers, one on the Earth, one in the space, and did this longitudinal measurement of all of these parameters to assess effect of space travel on human physiology, and found some fascinating changes such as decreased body mass, telomere elongation, intima media thickness changes, DNA methylation changes, and so on, that were affected by the space travel. This type of work would never be possible if we did not have both ability to biologically test these molecular changes and also analyze, integrate them and analyze with powerful computational algorithms. And moving step forward, this is not going to be something available only to NASA. Now to each of us, these devices that combine sensing with the AI on the edge device will allow each of us to track our EEG, our EKG, our oxygen saturation, our sleep in a way that we have never done before. And we will have input in the human physiology on a scale that is n=1, as I call it, bringing this kind of n=1ism science to the front line and really opening a new type of research that I'm really excited about. How did we apply in our group this type of study? Although we are mainly focused on AI application using clinical data and sensors, as I showed you, we also have looked into more molecular changes, and we were particularly interested in using non-traditional biospecimens such as urine to track conditions that have nothing to do necessarily with kidneys, such as sepsis, that is the widespread immune response to infection, and you have heard about that. In a sepsis patients, we have collected urine samples early in the course of their sepsis, within a few hours of sepsis diagnosis, and isolated cells that get filtered in the urine through the kidney. These cells can come from systemic circulation. They can represent white blood cells that circulate in your blood and they pass in the urine, or they can represent kidney cells that shed in the urine. Both of these cells we were able to isolate and then isolate our RNA from them and use whole genome sequencing with RNA to identify with machine learning algorithms pathways that are changed in the urinary cells in response to sepsis that interestingly reflect systemic inflammatory changes that you can see in the blood. So how exciting is that actually urine can show us what's happening in your bloodstream and your immune system. This exciting work is now expanding to be validated furthermore in a big group of patients. So moving forward, as example, in the kidney health, we proposed a concept of augmented decision making, where we combine omics data, such as genetics, microbiome, transcriptome, to identify genetic and epigenetics endotypes, meaning susceptibilities in our body for certain type of changes under acute stress. And then in the condition of acute stress, such as hospitalization, sepsis, or trauma, we can actually collect environmental and clinical data in a granular way with a sensor with the pervasive intelligence, and on the top of endotypes identify clusters and subtypes of complex diseases such as acute kidney injury and chronic kidney disease, and using reinforcement learning identify best interventions to treat those conditions. Once the patient leaves the hospital, using patient-generated health data and devices on the edge, we can track symptom recovery and monitor patients without ever bringing them in person. So this is the concept we propose that we may see for the many other conditions. What about identity earthquake? We live in an exciting world where the binary world as we know of is ending for the good. There is no better example than how we perceive gender today, much different than in the way that I was trained when I was 20 years old. We are understanding that everybody has potentially conflicting, overlapping identities, loyalty, and allegiance. So using genetic algorithms, we can identify something called identity by descent. The fine scale populations can be identified using advanced computational algorithms. These algorithms employ genetic similarity matrix, the length of DNA segments that are consistent with identity by descent from a common ancestor. Using this approach, a study has shown distances among populations geographically close and closeness between populations genetically distant. What about kidney disease? How is this type of analysis helping us in the kidney disease? Well, currently, there is a big controversy about glomerular filtration rate formula. This is the formula that uses commonly measured biological test creatinine to estimate how well your kidney are filtering blood. And this formula uses race modification for African Americans, race social social construct of race. And because of that, the use of the race modification actually underestimate the severity of the kidney disease in African Americans, potentially preventing them to getting timely life-saving treatments as a transplantation. In this study that used genetic African ancestry as opposed to the social construct of race, authors was able to show that if you use genetic African ancestry, you will have lower EGFR for 4% African Americans as opposed to the social construct of race. This is the reason why American Society of Nephrology has assembled a task force to reassess the inclusion of race in diagnosing kidney disease because of the potential bias it may introduce. But we are far from perfect. Women are less likely to be shown ads for high-paid jobs than Google, studies have shown. Studies have also shown that gender and skin type bias exist in commercial artificial intelligence systems. Facial recognition systems misidentify people of color more often than white people. Bias and unfairness exist in commonly used algorithms in medicine, as identified multiple articles that came in the last several years. Thus, we as a researcher in AI and healthcare, we need to be dedicated, and it has to be an integral part of our mission that the technology we develop should serve all of us and not just the privileged few. And with that, I would like to close this talk. And if you're interested in helping us improve health for all, please feel free to contact us. I'm very active on Twitter and email, or any other questions, please, you can send us also now. Thank you very much, and I will stop here. And if you want me to stop sharing my screen, please let me know.
Sharing the screen is fine. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really engaging. I don't see any questions at this moment, so I think it would be fine to give them a few more minutes just to make sure that they get a chance to ask. While we wait, one of the questions that kind of interests me is, what are some of the areas in medicine that have seen that you think have a dire need for IT?
I think, I'm biased for what I do. I think, as you've seen, I think intensive care unit is very important. And we have seen with the rise of the COVID and need for the large scale deployment of critical care that these type of technologies will help us take care of critically ill patients on a larger scale. So that's one of the, probably the most important areas in my opinion.
Okay, and we got our first question for tonight. On a practical application level, how much do you interact, collaborate with other industrial domains in terms of facial sensing, in particular automotive industry?
I'm based in academic centers, so my main collaborators are all in engineering departments, faculty. We have not necessarily to date have a very close contact, but we always look for collaborators. We are always in search for the better sensors. And I think that's a very important aspect of combining industry and academics for the future of this research. There is no question about that, because we need to be able to scale up, and we will not be able to do that without industry involvement.
And another question is, are there any dangers of using AI in medicine, and how severe are they?
Well, obviously, my talk was in a way daring to tell us that this is not a trivial thing. You know, as much as we are optimistic and enthusiastic about this, we need to be very much focused on fairness, transparency, and reproducibility. There is no difference, in my opinion, between algorithm and any other diagnostic test or technology you want to apply to someone. If someone is going to use these tests to make decisions, these tests to me will be validated with the same rigor as any other drug or diagnostic test we would use. And we have proliferation of all of these apps that many of them did not have a proper FDA approval. And I think it's a very important that, and I know that a lot of agencies are working on developing rigorous standards for the validation of the algorithms and their entry for the routine clinical care. Most of the things we have done so far is in a research domain.
No more public questions. So another one that came to mind for me is how much attention is paid towards the ethics of using AI in data science. Well, okay, data science more or less, but AI in medicine in general, given the fact that I personally am not sure, are there any specific institutions that deal with that specific area?
Well, I think a lot, you know, and it's increasing focus of research of many groups throughout the United States, at least that I know, and wide, and also in Europe. And there are strict regulations, you know, at least in the research, we have a very strict regulation in terms of how we apply this, how we collect the data, how we share them. As of now, there is a tight control of the data sharing in healthcare, and I think that those tight regulation exists for this reason, because we are all concerned about how the data collected as a part of healthcare in times when you are vulnerable and sick will be shared and commercialized. And I am very much convinced that research in this area will explode in the next several years.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions. We got the ball rolling. So first one is, thank you for your presentation. I was absolutely amazed with how far medicine and technology have developed. Is this the system being used only in the USA? And how long will it take to be applicable in the third world countries?
That's a great question. You know, one of our passion is also to make these things sustainable. In other words, you know, a lot of applications may be limited only for United States where that has electronic health records, but can we develop system that can be used somewhere that we don't have electronic health records? And that's another project we are currently working, developing those type of devices that can be sustained in a countries and healthcare system with a lower level of resources. As of now, all of our products in the research production, but you know, we are hoping to scale, and that's obviously for any researcher that's a next step. But I think it would be very interesting working with the researchers from the countries that do not have electronic health records, and we will be very interested in collaboration in a communities and health systems that have limited resources, to see how we can scale this and bring it to the patients who need it. Because for me, the most important thing is that this reach healthcare providers and patients who need that in technology.
And the next one from Ada is, good evening. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. My question is, what is your opinion on usage and development of gene therapy and cell therapies in the context of advancing precision medicine?
I think innovation, I'm always a big proponent of innovation. I think in the same way how AI needs to be ethical, trustworthy, and responsible, these therapies will need to be the same. As one of my slide talks about superhumans, I think it's inevitable that we will see in your generation, we'll see evolution of a human capacities with the enhancement of technology. And I think we need to embrace that, but we need to embrace them with caution, with a lot of thought. We need to participate in creating rules and discourse and context. And I think it's up to younger generation to embrace that concept and really get engaged in the ethical, social aspects of these applications.
And finally, a question from Amina. In your opinion, how long will it take for this innovation to become a standard procedure?
I think we will see technology, not necessarily just mine, but this type of AI entering, as soon as next 5 years. I mean, a lot of hospitals in the US already applying some type of automation in their algorithms, but we are hoping in the next 5 years you will see some of this technology coming. And I think that COVID will accelerate entrance of technologies like this.
On the note of COVID, we have one question. How do you explain almost 300,000 deaths from coronavirus when the USA is the richest country with the best universities, clinics, and research? You're permitted to just give your own opinion on this. So,
well, I can tell you something. I'm not necessarily expert on that, but I can tell you something else. I think that one thing that we know as a physician who work in the intensive care unit or in a healthcare, the technology we have throughout the healthcare is fantastic compared to what we had 30 years ago when I trained. But there are a lot of diseases that we are still at the beginning of understanding and dealing and conquering and living the consequences, especially intensive care medicine. So the best cure is prevention. We will face, as we grow older, new diseases, new challenges, and we will overcome them. But we need generations like your younger generations to get engaged in research, to get engaged in healthcare, and really be on the front of developing new approaches, new therapies in public health, in the personal wellness, and application of all of these technologies.
And as a closing remark, what would be your advice to everyone in tech that is afraid of going into medicine and combining IT and medicine, since that is a huge problem with people from my industry, which is IT. People kind of restrict themselves to only applications alone.
I think I think this is the time to get involved. This is a fantastic opportunity in which we can have more than just 9 companies in the world engaging in this research. And I would suggest look for the practitioners. Look for the physicians, look for the questions that you might be passionate, and you will be surprised how welcome you would be for the doctors or nurses or other healthcare providers. Because I think this is the truly example of team medicine. And team science. I think that technologies we are developing, not just in the computer science and medicine, but beyond that, are now requiring more than one type of specialist. And there will be no more problems that can be solved by one person, one specialty. We will require a team of experts together with the computers. And that is the future. And I think there is no better than this young generation who was raised with augmented intelligence. That is our cell phone. So embrace that and look for partners, be open and be humble and just have fun. I think that's the number one. You got to enjoy, you got to love what you do.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Once again, it was truly inspiring. It was truly enjoyable to listen to. And it combined the two fields that really need to work together, but never seem to have never seem to get an opportunity to just be in one place at the same time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a great day, evening.
Bye-bye.